뉴스타파는 지난 15일 브라질 리오데자네이로에서 열린 글로벌 탐사 저널리즘 총회에서 국정원 대선 개입 보도 사례를 발표했습니다. 뉴스타파는 이를 계기로 전 세계에서 비영리 탐사 보도 매체가 크게 늘어나는 배경과 이들의 역할을 짚어보는 기획 시리즈 세상을 바꾸는 힘 비영리 탐사 매체를 마련했습니다. 오늘은 그 두 번째 순서로 미국에서 가장 오래됐고 가장 규모가 큰 비영리 탐사보도 전문 매체 CIR, 즉 미국 탐사보도센터를 소개합니다. 이유정 기자입니다.
It's time to confront a major threat to our global environment.
대학 도시로 유명한 미국 캘리포니아주 버클리. 미국에서 가장 오래됐고 동시에 가장 독창적인 탐사보도 전문 매체 CIR, 즉 미국 탐사보도센터가 자리 잡고 있습니다. 지난 1977년 설립된 이후 대표적인 비영리 독립 언론의 위치를 굳건히 지키고 있습니다. 미국 방송 탐사보도의 상징인 60미닛의 프로듀서 로엘 버그만 등 불과 3명이 시작했지만 지금은 취재 제작 인력이 70여 명에 이를 정도로 성장했습니다. 멀티미디어를 활용한 독창적이고 탁월한 탐사보도로 정평이 나 있습니다. 현재 CIR을 이끌고 있는 로버트 로젠탈은 필라델피아 인콰이어러 편집국장을 거친 미국의 대표적 탐사 저널리스트입니다. 주류 매체의 외면으로 갈수록 위축돼가는 탐사 보도를 살리기 위해 지난 2008년 이곳에 합류했습니다. 먼저 CIR이 설립된 배경을 물었습니다.
But the three journalists who started it in 1977 felt that investigative reporting and the investigative reporting they wanted to do was not always going to be supported by what they called corporate media. And they wanted to be independent and have the freedom to do deep investigative stories on a range of subjects without feeling like their company or their business, if they were in a corporate situation, a for-profit news organization, could potentially stop or compromise their work. So they wanted to have the freedom to investigate anything.
CIR이 출범한 1970년대는 탐사보도의 전성기였습니다. 워터게이트 탐사보도는 사상 초유의 현직 대통령 하야를 불렀고 펜타곤 기밀문서 폭로 보도는 베트남전 종전을 앞당겼습니다. 둘 다 탐사보도가 민주주의의 중요한 보루임을 널리 각인시킨 사례입니다.
You know, after Watergate and the Pentagon Papers in the 1970s, there was a big increase and sort of glamour about being an investigative reporter and investigative reporting. But what happened around 1998-2000 was the beginning of the collapse of the business model, which you're familiar with, and the revenue began to decrease. And as newsrooms became smaller and smaller and smaller, there was a lot less support for investigative reporting because investigative reporters might do one story in a year. They usually were highly paid because they were the most experienced, and many of these people left. So, and because of the challenges of it, it's actually diminished, which created an opportunity for us.
하지만 2000년대에 들어 주류 매체의 탐사 보도가 크게 위축되면서 CIR 같은 독립 언론의 중요성이 더욱 커졌습니다. 수많은 비영리 탐사 보도 전문 매체가 주류 매체가 떠나버린 탐사보도의 빈자리를 메우기 시작했습니다. 그 중에서도 CIR은 탐사보도의 결과물을 멀티 플랫폼을 통해 다양한 형식으로 수용자들에게 전달하는 전략을 적극 활용하고 있습니다.
We've really experimented, in all ways of storytelling, and from animations to coloring books for children, to finger puppet videos for children, to working with CNN, to producing our own video. The technology has created the ability for a small news organization like ours to create content that can reach very, very big audiences, not only in San Francisco or California, not only in the United States, but really around the world. So that's, I think, any news organization now, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, really has to think that way. You're a content creator, and you're creating it as technology evolves. You're creating it for the evolving technology.
In Afghanistan, Iraq again. On the third floor, he tackled the two women in the hallway right.
And when she walks into a boutique, cameras with facial recognition software take her picture and may store it for years. The cameras are also equipped with software that tracks how much time she spends in each aisle. Liz stops at a pharmacy to pick up a few more things for her trip. Because Liz signed up for the drugstore's rewards programs,
there are certain stories that you can tell in a very powerful way with animation that maybe you can't tell because someone doesn't want to be on camera, someone doesn't want their voice used, but they're willing to talk to you. And you can write that and you can read it, but it's also sometimes very powerful if you can be creative and take the animation. You know, people like cartoons all over the world. That we part of our DNA, our culture, is to try and experiment and try things differently. And again, part of that for me comes out of a newspaper world, which I saw collapse because people thought you wrote your story, it was in a newspaper, and that's all we did. And that technology came and changed, and I think we want to be able to adapt to the changes. We looked at issues about seismic safety in every school in California, over 10,000 schools. It led to many changes. It won many journalism awards. It was really also a fantastic example of a multi-platform story. That was one of the things where we did a coloring book for children about what to do when there was an earthquake. And over 100,000 of those, more than 100,000 of those coloring books were distributed to children in schools.
CIR은 자체 웹사이트뿐 아니라 유튜브의 iFiles라는 탐사 다큐 채널을 운영하고 있습니다. iFiles엔 자신들이 제작한 프로그램과 함께 파트너 채널인 BBC와 알자지라 등 세계적 언론사의 탐사 보도물도 함께 올리고 있습니다.
And the idea was to try an experiment where you're doing quality, our work, but also the curated and aggregated work of other good news organizations doing high-quality video, and put it in one place. And that's also where we could experiment around animation, other forms of storytelling, see what worked. It's about a year old. I think it's averaged, right now it's averaging around 300,000 visitors a month, and there are about 12,000 or 13,000 members. So it's been fairly successful. Our strategy was never to be a destination website. Our strategy was to use big partners and take their audience for our content. Big national partners, CNN, Univision, NPR, and global partners like Al Jazeera were interested in working with us. So we began to look at things through a bigger prism. And I mentioned the veteran story, for example. That started with us looking at veterans issues in the Bay Area, and we found all these problems. And the obvious question is, if these problems exist in Oakland, in the Bay Area, are they problems all around the country? And we had all the data. And yet we found it. So what became a local story from the beginning became a big national story with a lot of impact. One of the key measures of our success and how we think about what we do is, will our story have an impact? Will it make a change? And that is the key thing that will keep us funded. The people who give us money, foundations and individual donors, whether it's $25 or close to $1 million, they believe that journalism, and especially investigative reporting, protects democracy. And our stories are unique, that we're not doing stories that everyone else is doing. So that's really a crucial element of how we decide what we do, and we can always do that better. I've had one situation where one of the board members was involved in a business that we were doing a story about it. And the only thing I did was a day or two before the story came out, I called him and said, we're doing a story about your business. You can't see it. I just want to let you know it's coming. And he was not happy. It's very important. Our credibility is our most important asset. And if we got in a situation where there was influence from the board, or we stopped a story, or did a story to hurt or go after an enemy of one of the board members or something, I wouldn't do it. And it would be one of the most destructive things that could happen to CIR or any news organization. I really...
정치 권력과 자본 권력으로부터의 독립, 심지어 이사회나 후원자로부터의 독립. 바로 CIR이 추구하는 탐사보도의 필수적 요건입니다. 미국 거대 언론 매체의 탐사보도가 거의 고사 상태에 이른 지금 비영리 독립언론 CIR은 탐사보도를 구하고 발전시켜 나갈 핵심 주체로 떠올랐습니다. 보다 나은 탐사보도로 무장해 보다 많은 수용자들에게 다가가고자 하는 CIR의 끊임없는 혁신은 저널리즘 지형의 근본적인 변화를 불러오고 있습니다.
The Philadelphia Inquirer, when I was the editor, started, had 630 people. 630 people in the newsroom. Now I think it has less than 200. When I came to the San Francisco Chronicle, there were close to 500 people. I think there's about 130 now. So you just can't do the investigative reporting. And think of all the things, not just investigative reporting, that are not being covered because there's no journalists. So that's also, what we call local government, county government, involves all this money. The courts, very few people watch these things now. So there's a real negative impact. So if there's not a for-profit model for doing investigative reporting, a nonprofit model with different revenue streams, supported by people who believe the press is important in a democracy, is one of the things that are filling this hole created by the collapse of corporate media.
국군 사이버 사령부 요원들이 선거와 정치에 개입하는 글을 올리고 심지어 국정원의 대선 개입 글을 리트윗한 사실이 밝혀졌습니다. 국정원의 정치 개입을 넘어서 군의 정치 개입이라는 어마어마한 사태에 직면하고 있는 것입니다. 국방부는 군 검찰과 국방부 조사본부의 합동조사로 진상을 밝히겠다고 나섰지만 벌써 사이버 사령부 요원들이 작성한 정치적인 글들이 속속 삭제되고 있습니다. 국방부 차원의 셀프 조사가 과연 국민들을 납득시킬 수 있을지는 극히 회의적입니다. 군 검찰과 조사본부 모두 국방장관의 지휘를 받습니다. 사이버 사령부의 대선 개입이 드러나면 가장 먼저 책임질 사람이 김관진 국방장관인데 그의 지휘를 받는 조직이 진상을 조사한다는 게 과연 가능할까요? 국정원의 대선 개입에 대해서는 자체기관이 아닌 경찰이 수사했는데도 보다시피 철저하게 진상 왜곡과 은폐로 끝났고 김용판 씨 등 책임질 사람들이 늘어나는 결과만 나왔습니다. 하루빨리 정치권 차원에서 특검에 합의해서 특별검사가 국정원 대선 개입과 사이버 사령부 대선 개입 의혹을 철저하게 수사하도록 해야 할 것입니다. 그 길만이 하루빨리 이 문제를 해결하고 국정을 정상 궤도로 안정시키는 길입니다. 오늘 뉴스타파 여기서 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.